hear me. I'm just going to do the usual double checking of the sound. Alright, looks like it's all working fine. Hello everyone, welcome to another drop-in session. I was just chilling outside a little bit waiting for this to start, and I think I might have caught the sun a little bit, so if my head is a bit shinier than usual, you now know why. So what I want to do this session is, well, I have a couple of things that we could do. I think what I really want to work with is metrics. I think a big part of building a chatbot is obviously creating its content, creating its conversations, creating its FAQs, which we've spent a lot of time doing. Particularly for not this bot specifically that we recently built, but the previous one, the customer service bot. We did a lot of all of that. For this one, we did quite a bit of that as well. But what we've kind of focused on with this one was integrations and new channels. So this is the yellow dog marketing chatbot, which so like I said, it has it only has 3 conversations, I think. 4 bespoke conversations. Yeah, Jacob built one when I wasn't there. So it only has this amount of conversations. It has very few FAQs, but it is a good looking bot. It works really well. If I can go and ask about all sorts of things. So I can ask about web design services. The things we didn't do with this bot that we did with the previous bot, which was a customer service bot, is we didn't do anything around metrics for this one, and we didn't do anything around training the bot. So I guess I want to do metrics today because that's kind of what I have in mind, but potentially next week we could work through training a little bit, because it is quite an important piece of work that you have to do within the bot. So a couple of reasons why I want to do metrics today. I'm just going to get a message from my trusty Jacob. Perfect, everything's working perfectly, so you can hear me, which is good news. I'm just going to grab some water. So part of the reason I want to do metrics today is because, like I said, it's a really important part of your bot. You can only really put any weight behind a business tool when you can actually prove that it's producing results. And in this very specific example of a lead generation chatbot, which in this example is working on a marketing agency, digital agency website, hopefully generating leads for the website, so hopefully getting people to fill out a few bits of information about themselves, email address, phone number, name, etc. And sending all of this to a sales CRM for the sales team. Obviously, what you want out of this is not a whole loads of fancy conversations. That's great, and you want to see how many messages the chatbot has received and all that sort of stuff, and that's great. But what you really want to know is how many people are actually going through the entire conversation. What you really want to know is how good is this tool as a lead generation tool, because that's what you're building. Now, when I work with partners, a big thing I tell them about is setting these expectations from early on. So what we went through here was basically we built the bot right away. So we had a bit of an idea of what we wanted to build. We went away and built the conversations, we went away and built the FAQs, went away and built the integrations, and all of that was kind of done because I know what I'm doing. But if this was a real bot that I was building for someone, I would very, very frequently, if not every time, start from the metrics, because that's where you want to start with. You want to say, all right, dear client, I can absolutely build a chatbot for you to solve all of your all of your challenges, but what is it that you'd like to achieve? Would you like to have less inquiries going through to your inbox? Would you like to generate more leads? Would you like to keep your visitors longer on your website? Would you like to create the most engaging conversation ever? By bringing to life a brand mascot or something like that, or a game or something like that. Whatever that metric is, obviously you'll want to track it, but you really want to know what it is so that you can start from that. Now, obviously I didn't do this for this one, so bad Alex, sorry. But we can kind of backtrack a little bit and go through that together. So one thing I want to do is, obviously I want to go into the dashboard here for this specific bot, and what you can see is the dashboard is very, very bare. There's nothing in here. So I have a date range here at the top, which allows me to obviously move around and see, all right, what happened if we started from March 1st to June 1st. And obviously these numbers change as I'm changing these dates. but all I have here are two metrics. So I have FAQs triggered, and I have conversations triggered. FAQs triggered, I already see how many times an FAQ was triggered. So if I click on this little button here, you can see which ones I'm talking, which ones are more frequently recorded or recently recorded. Sorry. So we have all of these FAQs here have been recently recorded as being in use. With there you go. So you have subscriber has been deleted here. So that just tells me that the person who's done this this specific subscriber has been deleted. So we can't really get access to this anymore, so that's interesting. And then here we have obviously all of the FAQs that we created. So I could click on this and say, on the 4th of May, this FAQ was triggered, and I could, from this information, I could just go and say, all right, well, I want to see what this FAQ is. So I can go here and have a look at that. So that's interesting. The next thing I have here is conversations triggered. So obviously a chatbot's knowledge is kind of made up of two big things, for lack of a better word, two big knowledge bases really. FAQs, which are meant to be one and done kind of questions. So one question sent to the bot, the bot instantly responds with a one message answer. So now this is not actually true. You can send multiple messages in a row, but one answer type of thing. So it's one done, one done, one done. That's an FAQ. And then on the on next to that we have conversations. Conversations are little processes that users go through. They start at the top, they go through multiple steps depending on what they do or what they want or what they say to the bot, and then they end at the bottom with hopefully doing exactly the things that you wanted this person to do. So here in this instance a conversation would be what did we have, like booking a meeting with an SEO specialist. So here in this date range, which is 1 week, we have had 3 conversations triggered, and I can click on this and see what they were. So we have 3 conversations on the 25th, FAQ conversation, lead gen, SEO conversation. Okay, so oops, I just clicked on that by accident. Okay, so this one tells us a little bit more. So it tells us which day that happened, so that's fine. It tells us which subscriber, which is good as well. But then it tells us which conversations was triggered. So the top 2 here are FAQ conversations. So if you, I'll go through that in a second. The third one is the lead gen SEO conversation, which basically means someone went into that conversation about talking to our salespeople about SEO. And this is really important. This is the kind of stuff we want to know and we want to keep track of. So what else can we do? Well, obviously these 2 metrics are not super valuable for us at the moment. It's good to know, but it's not incredibly business impactful. So what I can do is I can hit the edit button here in the top right, which kind of makes everything a bit transparent here. And I can click view metrics here on the right. And here I have a whole bunch of metrics that I can use to monitor what people are doing within my bot. So there's a whole bunch of them, and if you go on docs.ubisend.com, and if you go into metrics, overview of your Chatbot metrics, you'll have here a nice breakdown of all of them with a bit of a description of what they are. So if you're a bit lost, just get in there. It's nice and easy. But for now, let's just have a quick look at what we'd like. So obviously we want to know maybe some vanity metrics. I think is always, I mean, it's not incredibly interesting, but it's always interesting to kind of have a look at that. So we can go through total messages, could be an interesting one to have. So I've just clicked add here, which means that now it's just been added here, as you can see. I can obviously remove it and re-add it, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to add total messages. I'm going to add, this is an this is a lead generation chatbot. So I want to know, I quite like to have helpful and not helpful FAQs. This is always a good one, and we'll review why in a minute. Feedback responses, we're not going to do that. Live chat, we're not turning on live chat for this bot. Average session length. So average session length is quite an interesting one, because that would be, how many messages back and forth has been sent between the user and the bot on average. And for a lead gen bot, although you don't necessarily want to keep an eye on that too closely, what you really want to have is quite a short average session length. because what the purpose of your bot as a lead gen bot is to get people to your sales team. It's not to have a really long chat. And so if you create a bot that ends up having 30, 40 messages back and forth between every user, now it's good because or potentially good because your users are engaged and they enjoy your bot. Although it potentially means as well that they're getting lost and keeps asking the same questions. But it's not ideal because you don't want people to talk too much to your bot. You want people to go through the inquiry, ask a question, go through the form, quote unquote form, the workflow, and send the lead to your team, and that's it. So it's something to keep an eye on, but I wouldn't put it in my main dashboard. Average session, yeah, we just went through that. All right, cool. So I think what I'll add is small talk triggered, total subscribers, and I think that's probably it for now. So let's have a look at that. So, all right, so we have now 7 metrics here, which is not too bad. We can have a little look at what we want to do with them. So we obviously have FAQs triggered. The top 2 here are the first ones we did, and then here at the bottom we have maybe a bit of vanity metrics. So total subscribers is the number of users throughout this period that have talked to the bot. So that's quite good. And total messages is definitely a vanity metric. You don't necessarily want to track that, but it's sometimes nice to just have. It's a bit like page views on a Google Analytics dashboard. It's vanity metrics. It's nice to see that you've had 2 million page views, but really what you want is how many people have actually converted or called your main line or whatever. Now we get into more interesting stuff. So FAQs triggered. I added small talk triggered. Sorry. That's not what I wanted. I already had FAQs triggered. That's why I got confused. All right, so FAQs triggered, I want to keep that. And then helpful FAQs and not helpful FAQs. So those are really, really important to me because when people talk to you about, so I'm going to save this for now. Did I activate this for this one? So at the moment this is off, but, oh sorry, it's not what I meant. So in the FAQs, what you can do is you can add a follow-up, which is at the moment it's off. So a follow-up is this. So someone sends a message to your bot. We'll say, let's say, when are you open? And then the bot responds with the opening hours, and then it responds with a was this helpful question. And this question basically offers the user 2 options, one saying yes or saying no. If the user says yes, that's obviously marking that this question was helpful to them. And so it brings up that metric by 1. If the user says no, obviously that says that the question, the FAQ wasn't helpful, bringing the not helpful metric up by 1. The good aspect of this is that it keeps track of the performance of your bot in a kind of a passive way. So for now, I can turn this on. And that's just so I can show you what this looks like. So I'm just going to send this message or this question. Do you have a portfolio I can look at? Cool. So it's sending me the message like before, but then just below that we have this kind of yes/no interaction, and so I can say yes to this in this instance, and it's just going to say, "Great, I'm glad I could help. Feel free to ask me any additional questions." And if I send it again, and I'm just going to pretend that this is not what I wanted, so I can just say no, this was not helpful. What the bot is going to do is it's going to ask me if I want to speak to a human, and that again super important for us to keep an eye on, because that means if our not helpful metric is high up, we obviously have some work to do in terms of actually writing the right content or right answers, potentially training the bot. So there's a lot to dig into for that. But if the helpful metric is high, then we're doing well. One thing that I want to put out there right now, because I know that I'm going to get the question, I'm going to be asked about it, is people don't tend to respond to this follow-up question unless they really find that the answer was not helpful. And so I would say that on average, there's a 2-to-1 ratio in terms of people actually, when people will respond to this question, typically you'll see a 2-to-1 ratio between not helpful and helpful, for the simple reason, kind of psychological reason of when people get the right answer, they typically just move on. They don't really give you the feedback that yes, that was the right answer, although we'd love them to. Unfortunately, that's not really how it works. And so don't panic if you see the not helpful FAQs being 2-to-1 higher than helpful FAQs. So if you see 10 helpful FAQs and 20 not helpful FAQs, that's quite a normal ratio. Now, if you see 60 not helpful and 10 helpful, then you probably have a problem there. So it's something to keep an eye on. I do really like this. Total messages, you can also click into it here. Oh, unfortunately that broke for me. That's fine, we can have a look at that later on. It's probably because I'm just using the demo bot at the moment. So, all right, so those are the kind of the default metrics. And again, if I wanted to, I could go in here and add loads more. So if I was to add live chat or anything like that, I could actually add top FAQs triggered, which could be quite interesting to have a look at. This is a nice table here, and I can put this in the middle here maybe. Actually, it doesn't really look that good. Oops. See if I can move it back. Yeah. Okay. So this is a nice little table. It kind of basically gives me a similar kind of view as this one, but just in a nicer format here. All right. So those are kind of default metrics, which is good. We have that now. Next thing I want to do is with the ubisend platform, we can mess around and create our own metrics, which is pretty exciting in my book. So what I want to do with this is basically the purpose of creating your own metrics is to obviously track the things that you care about. It's not about number of messages sent or some sort of metrics that ubisend has come up with, like leads generated. Now leads generated for your company might be completely different than leads generated for a completely different company. So we can't kind of quantify that for you or set that up for you. So instead what we've done is we created basically a page where you can create your own metrics, which is incredibly good. So to figure out what kind of metrics you want to create, you want to start with this at the very start of building your bot. Ideally, you kind of start with that at the start and not think about it at the end. But here in this particular build, we have pretty much three products that we want to keep an eye on. And so the typical thing that you'd like to do is you'd probably want to do one metric per product. So you're keeping an eye on how many leads did we generate per product. So that's pretty common. So in this instance, we have SEO, PPC, and web design. So what you'd like to be able to see when you go into your dashboard is, okay, this week we've generated 20 SEO leads, 2 web design leads, and 12 PPC leads. Okay, good. That's helpful. So that's phase 1. So let's just do that for now. Custom metrics. So we're going to do SEO leads. I always hesitate between capitalizing or not. I'm going to do not. So this is one metric. Another metric is web design leads. And another metric would be PPC leads. Okay. So as you can see, creating metrics is super simple. All you have to do is add a bit of text, just save that, and now I have this metric here that is super simple. It's super easy to set up. The next thing I want to do is I obviously want to tie this to a specific conversation. Now at the moment, the metrics are generated or they are created within the platform, but they're not tied to anything. So there's nothing that will go up or down in terms of values within these metrics unless I tie them to something specific within the interactions of the bot. And so what I want to do is I want to go back to my conversation builder here, and I want to find each associated conversation. So we have obviously a lead gen conversation here about SEO. And so if I go into here, just double checking with my team that everything's going okay, because I did receive a message. Perfect. I did nothing there. Cool. So this is the conversation for the lead gen for SEO. And we obviously just created an SEO lead generated metric. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I tie this metric to this conversation, but at a very specific part of it. I don't want to do this at the top here. So I could, within this trigger, I could add a metric that says, SEO lead. Great, we have an SEO lead, but that wouldn't really make sense because this is the very start of the conversation. So the user might have clicked this button on accident, might have entered this workflow on accident. They might start the workflow but not go through the end, which means that the lead is not really generated or sent to your sales CRM. So obviously all of this points to just one place really to put it in, is the last kind of last step. So your instinct might be to put it in transition on the last step, but that wouldn't work either because there's no transition to another step, so that wouldn't make sense. So you tag or you fill out metrics in transition between two steps. And so here, logically, therefore, to increase this metric, we were going to do it in the previous to last step, in transition between the previous to last step and the last step. So if I go in transition here, and I just say add a metric, and this was the SEO one, so I can go into this little drop down here, and I can find the one I want. So SEO leads here, and I can save this. Perfect. So now as I save this, it's going to refresh, and as I go down here, as you can see now, I'm basically saving this metric, or sorry, increasing this metric in the transition on the very last step. So when someone goes from meeting question mark to thank you, we know now that this is now an absolute new lead, and we're going to increase that metric. So let's double check that I've done this properly. Yep, yeah, right here. Cool. So we've done one. What we want to do is we want to do obviously the other ones. So PPC, we're going to follow the same process. We're going to find a conversation. We're going to go at the bottom of the conversation, and then in transition, in the very last step, we're going to add a metric that is, sorry, I forgot which conversation this was. I literally just looked at it. PPC. All right. So I'm going to go and find PPC and save that as a metric. Okay, so when someone gets to this step, we're going to increase that PPC metric lead by 1. The next one is web design. So it feels like there's some noise in my house. I don't really know what that is. Okay, so web design needs same process. Obviously, we're going to find the conversation. We're going to go at the bottom of the conversation. In transition between the previous to last step and the last step, we're going to increase this metric by 1. So I'm going to add metric, and I'm going to find web design. Save that. Okay, cool. So we have created 3 custom metrics. We've tied these 3 custom metrics to the conversation builder, to each relevant conversation, obviously, at a very specific step of the conversation, so that we don't just get false positives or get told off by sales for presenting really high number, but actually they didn't get any data. So that's obviously very important. Now what I want to do is I want to go back to my dashboard here, and I want to edit this dashboard. And if I edit this dashboard and I click View Metrics, you'll see that at the very top now I have my brand new metrics here. So ubisend by default will always put your custom metrics at the top of the list, just for kind of ease of you finding them. And so what I want to do is, obviously these 3 metrics are really, really important to me. So I'm going to add all 3 of them to my dashboard. Again, because they're so important, I want to make sure that I've done this in the previous session, so I'm not going to go through this again, but if you go and find the customer service bot I did, I went through the whole OBA framework, which is basically objective behavior acquisition, which basically says your dashboard should be displayed in a way that is very actionable and displays the objective of the tool you're using at the very top. And in this instance, the objective of this bot is obviously to generate leads. And so although the total subscribers and the total messages are really nice and fine to have a look at, it's not really what's going to make any difference in your business. So what I want to do is I want to move these leads, these lead metrics at the top here. So again, really interesting that you can absolutely tweak the dashboard to your exact requirements. I think that's really, really important. We don't want to be forcing you to use a dashboard in a very specific way, because that would be completely silly. Okay, so I have now 3 metrics here. Very, very cool. What I can do is, obviously I could go and play with the bot and try and increase these metrics, which kind of brings me on to a point that's kind of important, is whatever you do within this demo area doesn't impact your metrics in your dashboard, which is very important, because you and your team will spend hours talking to this bot in the demo area, testing your conversations, testing your integrations, and if after all of that, all of your metrics were basically messed with, that wouldn't be any good for your business. So it's really, really important to remember, as you create your metrics, that you won't be able to test them in real life unless you use it on a real chatbot. So you could go on your Facebook page, you could go on your actually deployed chatbot on your website, anything you want to kind of test this, but not in here. So even if I was to go through this entire conversation and became a lead into the eyes of the workflow there that we just set up, it still wouldn't increase that metric. Okay, so that's step 1. So if you remember, I kind of said that there are a few things that I'd like to track as a if I was the owner of this bot. The first is I want to know how many metrics per product, how many leads per product I'm producing. So that's really, really important. I think that's pretty clear to everyone. The second thing I want to set up is how many leads in total we're having. I think that's pretty cool. I think if we could create one general metrics that's like leads generated or something like that, total leads, for instance, that would be fantastic, because it would allow us to, at a very quick glance, say, all right, this bot has generated 563 leads. Perfect. So I can go, marketing can go to sales and say, I've created 563 leads. Sales can go to marketing and say, we thank you for all of these leads. We've generated loads and loads of sales or whatever. So you can really use that metric really, really easily. So what I can do here is I can go into integrations. I can go back to custom metrics, and I'm just going to do total leads. Now, the interesting part of this is, which might be, which you may not expect, is now we obviously have SEO leads, web design leads, PPC leads, and then total leads. And obviously, total leads encompasses the three previous ones it put together. Now, what I can do is I can go back to the builder, and per conversation, what I can do is loading. Is on the very last step or the previous to last step, same reasoning as before. I can edit this and I can go in transition and track another metric here. So not only are we tracking this in transition, adding one value to the SEO leads metric, we're also adding one value at the same time to the total leads metric. And this is really cool because it allows us to really have multiple tracking within one conversation step, which is really, really good. It's really important. You'll use that all the time. In this step, particularly, we have total leads and SEO leads. That was SEO, yes. So now we can do this with the other ones as well. So we can do PPC, can go through that, loading PPC, transitions, same thing. So I can increment the total leads at the same time as I'm incrementing the PPC leads. Saving that. Back to the builder, web design. Same thing here, transition, and we're going to increase total leads. Okay, so hopefully that's quite clear. You can actually track multiple metrics within one single conversation step, which is really, really important. Again, you'll use that all the time, honestly. So what I can do now, obviously, is I want to add this new metric into my dashboard. Now, this is obviously total metrics, total leads. So obviously this is a very important one for me. So I'm just going to put it here at the very top. All right. So what can I do here now? I think the next step of any kind of tracking within the chatbot is to try and figure out, or at least suss out, and I'll get into some more specific technical aspect of it later on, but it's kind of suss out how many people start going into a workflow and don't go to the end, or how many people convert fully to the workflow. And one way to do this is, again, to use custom metrics. Now, we're actually rolling out very soon new ways of doing this, which will be very, very exciting. And I can't tell you much more about it, but it will include kind of this approach of starting at the top, ending at the end, and seeing who goes through every single step and who doesn't. This kind of funnel approach. We're going to make it as part of the native platform, so you won't have to really build it yourself. But it's still interesting to think about it from a DIY perspective, because that's how you can really set your mind to using the metrics and the custom metrics feature within the platform to your own kind of requirements, because it's just gonna trigger some things in your brain to think about, oh, I could actually track this because I have the power to do this. So for the sake of this of this build, because we don't have the feature anywhere at the moment in the platform, so let's go through it manually. So obviously we have three metrics here: SEO leads, web design leads, PPC leads. What I'd like us to do is know how many people started in these specific conversations. Because as you remember, we've put we've incremented the metric at the very last step of the conversation. So we know when they get all the way done, they are a metric. That's great. But how many people were at the top? Now we could go through this by looking at conversations triggered, and we have 3 conversations triggered here. Or we could have a table of conversations, which is good as well. But what we really want is, I think, is just to create our own kind of reporting. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do SEO conversation web design conversation and PPC conversation. And so now I have these 3 conversation metrics that I can tie to the very onboarding of these conversations. And this will allow me to say, okay, there's been 100 people went through the first step of the PPC conversation, but only 23 people made it to the end. So what's going on there? Or 23 people, maybe that's a good conversion rate. But this is really how you can start messing around with these metrics and really understanding the experience that your users are going through when talking to your bot. And so let's go and set this up. So we've obviously created the metrics, which is good. We can go to the SEO conversation. Now, what we can do here is we don't really have to mess around with finding the right step for this. What we want is just at the very top, as soon as they get into this conversation, we want to track this metric, or we want to increase this metric. So it is a fly. And so I can click on the trigger here, and I can actually do this right from the trigger, which is really important, really interesting. You don't have to get the user to do anything, which I know for a fact is how other chatbot platforms do it. Other chatbot platforms will require the user to at least do one step, do one thing, click a button, or do something to kind of start tracking their activity. But within the ubisend platform, you can track this as soon as they enter the workflow. So that's really, really important. So I can add a metric here, and I can just say, I completely forgot which one that was, SEO. So SEO conversation. So I can save this. Perfect. So we've updated the trigger for this specific conversation. As you can see, it's now going to trigger based on a message being sent that is equal to SEO _services, but also it's going to instantly start tracking or increase the value on SEO conversation metric. Okay, so obviously, unsurprisingly, we're going to go through and do that for the other ones. PPC. Triggers. Lead gen, so this is PPC, so we can do, oops, sorry, it's not a variable, it's a metric. So it's PPC conversation. Oh, I mistyped this. That's not very smart, is it? I'm gonna go back and just edit that, or else it's gonna really hurt my brain. PP conversation, that doesn't really make any sense. All right, save this. Chat. PPC conversation. Okay, I don't really know why I have 2 in here. I think I can just delete this. Okay, so add a metric. PPC conversation, save this. Okay, finally, web design conversation. View trigger, add this, add a metric. Web design, so web design conversation. Perfect. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. So all I want to do now is, well, basically now we're tracking both sides. So we're tracking on onboarding into the conversation, and we're tracking on actual conversion at the very end. So we can kind of create this funnel approach. So if we go back to the dashboard and we just add these metrics now into it, now I realize the dashboard is getting pretty hefty, but bear with me here. we can actually create now this kind of, let's say I put this up here, put this up here, and put this up here. And I can move this one just below the other one. So PPC goes below PPC, web design goes below web design. Okay, so now I can save this. My total leads are here in the bottom left. That's fine. All I want to do now is I want to be able to say 120 people went into SEO Conversation and 12 people came out. Therefore, I have a 10% conversion rate. 12 people went into PPC Conversation, but 12 people came out, 100% conversion rate. Or 100 people went into Web Design Conversation and 0 came out, 0% conversion rate. So this is exactly the type of dashboards that you want to start setting up for your chatbot when you create, particularly in this specific example, a lead gen chatbot. Now, obviously, what you'd like to do eventually is create some sort of dashboard, some sort of funnel representation, which, as I said, is going to come up. We're gonna come out with that really soon. But for now, this is kind of the right way to approach this. And obviously, I did step 1 and step 8 or whatever that was, first step and last step. But what you could do is you could do the similar thing across all of the steps, or you could actually measure one very specific step of your workflow. So let's say, for instance, that you're asking very kind of simple information from your users when they are going through this workflow, like what is their first name, what is their last name, which city do they live in, and then all of a sudden you have a pretty big ask, like what is your personal phone number? There's a high chance that there's going to be a big dip in terms of conversion at that point, because giving away your phone number to an online chat might be quite scary for some people. And so what you could do is you could absolutely create a metric that you could reuse across all of your conversations, which will be phone number asked or something like that, and then phone number given. And so you could really measure these two from one step to the next as well. So you can just say phone number asked at the point of transition to this phone number question, and then phone number given at the point of transition to the next step of the conversation. And so that way you can really see where are the sticky points within your chatbot. Is it when you're asking a phone number? Is it when you're asking for a purchase ID or something like that? Is it when you're asking about let's say you create an HR chatbot? A very common thing with HR chatbots is that it's going to actually take complaints from employees as well, where they'll say, what's happened, what was the conflict, who was it with, what happened, and kind of the general aspect of it. And typically people will go through a lot of it, but as soon as it's about giving a name or accusing someone specifically, there's going to be a lot of drop off there, because people don't really want to give out a name and they just want to talk to someone at that point. And so it's a really nice learning experience to set this all up and then seeing where people drop off, because you can say, all right, let's remove that step completely and tag on a live chat support at that point, or tag on a phone number that they can call, or just rephrase the question, add some sort of disclaimer saying you will not be held accountable for blah blah blah, or at the point of giving your email address, you could add, if people are dropping off really quickly at that step, you could add, we will never spam you, or we'll never send you unsolicited emails and things like that. So you can really use this data to inform the build around your bot. Hopefully that makes sense. I think what we have here is a pretty good dashboard, honestly. I think this is exactly what I would build for my lead gen bot. Another thing I would add potentially is interactions. I think I quite like interactions in general. I would put it at the bottom because I don't think it's that helpful to have it at the top. But it's quite nice to see. Basically, this graph shows me at which point of the day, on average, my bot is more active, as in how many people talking to my bot are really active. And as a lead gen chatbot, it's quite interesting to keep an eye on that, because if everything is really active between 9 and 5, then you can actually leverage a bit of live chat and things like that. Now, if everything is really active after 5 or at midnight, then obviously automation should take over and should keep an eye on that, on the automation being really slick when everyone's away. But this is kind of a nice graph to keep an eye on as well. I really like having that in the background. And then again, to just kind of wrap up around the Vanity Metrics, I think Vanity Metrics are great. They're nice. I mean, we're all a bit vain. It's nice to keep an eye on it. Total subscribers, total messages. I think it's nice to keep an eye on. I think also it's interesting to keep an eye on total subscribers and then comparing that with the leads you've created. So if you have 10,000 users on your bot every month, but only 2 leads, then you know there's probably something wrong with your bot. And again, having this kind of dashboard set up this way allows you to keep an eye on that. And then the helpful, not helpful, I think that's really, really good. If you were to use live chat, there's loads and loads of metrics around live chats, which are really good. So you have live chat per location, live chat claims, live chat uniques, live chat resolved, all that sort of stuff. Really, really important for that sort of stuff. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. I think next week we're going to do a bit of training on this bot, because I do realize we have not done it before, and it would be quite helpful to have this session for this particular bot. But now we have a really good bot at this stage. We have a fully formed bot with FAQs, albeit just a few FAQs, a few conversation workflows that are set up. It's nice in design. Last week we went through and made sure that the full-page version of it worked as well, so you can go back and watch that if you missed it. It's integrated with our CRM, which is also really exciting. So you can go back and watch that as well. That was two episodes ago. So next week we're going to do training, and then we're basically going to say goodbye to this bot and just kind of move on to the next thing. So I hope to see you then. If you have any questions, obviously just reach out to sales@ubisend.com, or reach out to going to ubisend.com/demo. You can book a demo with us, or just leave a comment under here, and don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss the next session. All right, see you.